In section 3.2.17, the following data represent exam scores in a statistics class taught using traditional lecture and a class taught using a flipped classroom. We want to complete parts A through C below. The traditional, here's your numbers, and then here's the flipped numbers. So it says which course has more dispersion in exam scores using the range as the measure of dispersion. So that means you want to be able to find the range. So in the first data set, we want to figure out which one is the largest data value. Well, the largest data value is 86.5. And the smallest data value is 56.9. So when we subtract those, we get 29.6 for the range. For the flipped class, we want to find the largest data value. And the largest data value is 95.1. And the smallest data value is 62.6. So when we subtract those two, we get 32.5 for the range of the flipped course. So the traditional course has a range of 29.6, while the flipped course has a range of 32.5. Thus, the flipped course has more dispersion. Next, it says which course has more dispersion in exam scores using the sample standard deviation as the measure of dispersion. Now, in our previous examples, you want to know how to be able to find, the standard deviation by hand. But now we're going to start using technology. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our problem here. So to the right of the table, we're going to go ahead and open up StatCrunch. So here's our data. And what we want to do is we want to find the sample standard deviation of the traditional and the sample standard deviation of the flipped. So let me go ahead and open that up here. So we're going to go to stats. So once we go to stat, then we're going to go down to summary stat, and then we're going to select columns. So since we want to find both, we're going to select traditional, and then we can hit the control button to make sure we get flipped. Okay, so since we want to be able to find the standard deviation in this scenario, which is the sample standard deviation, we're going to select the standard deviation. So then we're going to select compute. So we're going to go ahead and then copy that data into our screen. Okay, so you can see here that if we round the traditional standard deviation to 3 decimal places, it becomes 9.068. So therefore, the traditional course has a standard deviation of 9.068. And if we take a look at the flipped, we get 8.48. If we round it to 3 decimal places. So the flipped course has a standard deviation of 8.48. Therefore, the traditional course has more dispersion. Now in part C it says, suppose the score of 62.5 in the traditional course was incorrectly recorded as 625. How does this affect the range? What we're going to do is we're going to recalculate the range based on its change to the data set. Now the largest value is going to be 625, while the smallest value is 56.9. So we're going to take 625 and subtract 56.9, and that gives us an amount of 568.1. So let's see what happens to the data when we change that number of 62.5 to 625. So down here where it says 62.5, we're going to change that to 625. Okay, so let's see what happens when we find the standard deviation of the traditional column. So we're going to go to summary stats, go to column, select traditional, and then we're looking at the standard deviation, and then we're going to select compute. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and then copy that. Okay, so we can see that the standard deviation now for the traditional course, rounded to 3 decimal places, becomes 153.204. So you can see now that the range changes from 29.6 to 568.1, and the standard deviation changes from 9.068 to 153.204. So it's a drastic change depending on the particular values that you're putting in to that particular column.